A cold, wet wind lashed Alex's face as he climbed out of the old Volkswagen. Above them, the clouds hung so low and black that it seemed they were about to collapse, burying the entire small, god-forsaken town of Blackwood Creek. "The Wanderer's Refuge," read the sign above the entrance, faded and listing to one side. The building was massive, seemingly constructed at the beginning of the last century. 3 stories of dull, dark red brick with narrow windows like blind eyes. Around the hostel, there was no soul, only a thick, overgrown forest pressing right up against the front door. Alex, an aspiring extreme vlogger, and his filming partner Lena had come here for content. Their channel, Urban Legends, was slowly fading, and they desperately needed a blast, something that would push them into the trends. Blackwood Creek and its refuge were perfect. Rumors online suggested the hostel had been closed 15 years ago after a series of mysterious guest disappearances. The official story was sanitation issues and bankruptcy. The unofficial one was something far more sinister. "Ready?" Alex turned to Lena, who was already pulling out a professional camera and tripod. Despite her evident nervousness, Lena smirked. "As ready as I'll ever be. They say the shower doesn't even work here, but the content will be golden, won't it?" They circled the building. The only point of entry was the back door to the basement, propped open just enough for a person to squeeze through. The rusty lock was broken, indicating they weren't the first ghost hunters or simply curious visitors. "This way," Alex whispered, turning on his flashlight. "Down first. Rumor has it, all the weird stuff started in the laundry room." The basement greeted them with icy air, the smell of mold, rotting wood, and something subtly metallic like old blood. The walls were wet, and water was seeping from the pipes. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the silhouettes of giant washing machines covered in moss and cobwebs, and stacks of dirty, crumpled sheets piled in a corner. "Look at the floor." Lena directed her light onto a strange track. "That's not water." A dark, dried stripe stretched under their feet. It looked like grime, but had a strange, almost organic pattern, as if something had been dragged. The stripe led from the laundry room deeper into the basement, towards a concrete staircase heading up to the first floor. Alex felt a shiver crawl down his spine, one that had nothing to do with the basement's temperature. It was that incomparable dread he sought but never truly wanted to find. Starting recording, his voice sounded strained. "We're in the Wanderer's Refuge. Time is 11:45 p.m., starting our investigation. If we don't make it out, you know what to do." Lena nodded, her eyes fixed on the darkness where the flashlight beam ended. She noticed a word someone had scratched roughly onto one of the washing machines. It was faded with time, but a part of it remained clearly readable, as if engraved with a nail. "Leave." Words on a wall were one thing, but from somewhere deep inside the hostel from the upper floors came a sound. A dull, wet thump-thud, as if something heavy, soft, had fallen onto the wooden floor. "Let's go up," Alex said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Lena didn't speak. She just gripped her camera tighter, and they began the ascent up the slippery, rotten steps, one after the other. The steps to the first floor groaned so loudly that Alex and Lena instinctively paused after each one, listening. Eventually, they found themselves in a narrow, low corridor that led directly into the hostel's main reception area. This place was a time capsule frozen in a moment of sudden flight. On the old, dust-covered reception desk lay objects suspended in eternity: a bronze bell, a few registration forms, and what made Alex tense up, an open, rusty guest ledger. The last entry was made exactly 15 years ago. The guest's name was illegible. Next to it, scratched in red ink, or what looked like it, was the letter V. 15 years, Lena whispered, holding the camera as still as possible. "And no one has touched this. No vandals." This place has a bad reputation even among vandals, Alex replied, scanning the hall. Look at the walls. The wallpaper, once perhaps a pale green, was damp and swollen, hanging in shreds. But through it, dark, blurred stains were showing through, a pattern of mold that seemed to form something resembling faces distorted in terror. Or perhaps it was just a trick of the light and imagination. The chair behind the reception desk was overturned, and in its wooden backrest gaped a single deep scratch, as if left by someone with incredible strength and long, sharp claws. They moved on. From the reception, the hall led to a common living room and the entrance to the kitchen. The living room was a collection of old, heavy furniture. The sofa was slashed down the middle with yellowed stuffing sticking out. On the coffee table were overturned chess pieces. The smell here is changing, Lena noted, covering her mouth with her sleeve. The scent of mold and dampness began to mix with something else, subtle but nauseating. A smell Alex identified as a mix of putrid meat and burnt electrical wiring. From the kitchen where they headed came a quiet, steady dripping. The kitchen was enormous. Industrial-sized stoves and sinks, all covered in grease and rust. The dripping came from a huge double refrigerator. Alex cautiously opened it. Inside, despite 15 years of neglect, a surreal order reigned. No food, no rotting remains, only old, empty glass jars, and right in the middle of the bottom shelf lay a single red, fresh rose. It hadn't dried, hadn't wilted. Its petals were damp, and its thorns looked sharp and black. This was absolutely impossible. Someone was here, recently, Alex whispered, his finger trembling as he pushed the camera's focus button. This couldn't have been here for 15 years. Lena moved closer, focusing the light on the rose. Maybe local teenagers, a prank. No sooner had she said it than a sharp, rattling sound erupted from the living room behind them. The bell. The small bell on the reception desk, which they thought was silent, rang 3 times. Loudly, insistently, they scrambled back into the hall. The reception bell was still shaking, but there was no one around it. Not the slightest air movement, not a speck of dust. That's not the wind, Alex said, his eyes darting frantically. And not rats. He raised the camera. We just recorded paranormal activity in the Wanderer's Refuge. Unexplained object movement. Lena was staring at the guest ledger. The spot of red ink on the page with the letter V had grown larger. She swore it was smaller a second ago. At that moment, from the depths of the hostel, from the second floor, came a thin, drawn-out moan. It was a sound impossible to mistake for the decay of the building or the noise of the forest. It was the sound of human, despairing anguish. "We have to go up," Alex said. His voice mixed fear and adrenaline. "That's our main goal. The people who disappeared here." They passed the staircase leading up. On the wall near the first landing, someone had drawn a crude, childlike image with black marker or soot. A stick figure with very long, thin limbs, reaching towards a drawn window, and then a second, even louder bang resonated, this time directly above them, as if something had hit the ceiling with a heavy fist, shaking the dilapidated structure. Plaster rained down after the impact. They ran upstairs. The second floor met them with an absolute silence that was worse than any noise. It was the silence of a vacuum, swallowing sound and light. The corridor was long, like a tunnel, with rows of doors on both sides, each numbered with an old, blackened brass plaque. The air here was heavy and viscous, as if they had entered a thick fog, invisible to the eye but palpable on the skin. The smell of blood and char that they had noticed on the first floor was more intense here, intermingled with a distinct aroma of cheap cologne and cigarette smoke that appeared suddenly and vanished just as fast. A scent that could belong to a long-vanished guest. "Stop," Lena abruptly halted, raising her hand. Alex froze. "What? Did you hear that?" she whispered, fear reflected in her eyes. A squeak. It wasn't the floorboards. It was the squeak of springs. A quiet, rhythmic sound coming from one of the rooms, as if someone was slowly rocking on an old bed. The squeak stopped just as they reached the room numbered 13. Room number 13, Alex whispered, aiming his flashlight at the locked door. It's a cliché, but he tried the handle. The door was locked from the inside. Straining their ears, they listened to what was happening inside. Silence. But then, from behind the door came a wet, heavy exhale, sounding so close that someone might be standing right on the other side and listening intently to their presence. Alex shoved the door with his shoulder. It didn't budge. He scanned the corridor and noticed something he hadn't seen before. Under every door, not just 13's, lay a thin, crumpled piece of newspaper, pressed from the inside to seal the gap. They were hiding something. Or hiding from something, Lena mumbled, trying to make out the contents of the paper. Above door 13 was a small ventilation grate. Alex offered Lena his shoulder, and she, balancing precariously, held the camera lens up to the grate. The camera captured a dark void, and then, out of the darkness, directly into the lens, an eye emerged. Not just any eye. A cloudy, whitish, enormous eye that looked unnaturally large for a human face. It stared at Lena with such cold, consuming hatred that she tumbled off Alex's shoulder, gasping in terror as the camera hit the floor with a muffled thud. There's someone in there, Lena shook, pointing at the door. Alex grabbed the camera, aimed the flashlight, and looked at the grate again. It was empty now. Only darkness. Quiet. Let's move. He grabbed her arm. They ran past the rooms, past doors 14, 15, 16. At the end of the corridor, where room 17 should have been, there was instead a hole in the wall, covered by an old, torn tarp. Behind the breach was a narrow, utterly unlike the hostel's architecture, concrete shaft with a ladder descending into absolute darkness. This was not part of the original building. It was something added later, a secret. They approached the tarp. It was damp, and that smell again, cigarette smoke and cologne. Lena noticed a key lying on the floor, right in front of the shaft. An ancient heavy key with the number 19. But there's no room 19 here, Alex said, checking the door numbering. This floor only had 18 rooms. At that moment, the silence was shattered. From the corridor they had just left, laughter erupted. A quiet, nasal, childlike laugh. It echoed off the walls, growing louder and softer, as if someone invisible and very short was running down the hall, playing hide-and-seek. Quick! Inside! Alex threw back the tarp and, without hesitation, climbed into the concrete shaft first. Lena followed him, taking one last look back. Opposite their hiding place, by room 13, now stood a small, pale figure in a long white dress. The figure was motionless. It was simply standing, head tilted, watching them. As Lena dove into the shaft, she heard something glass crash and shatter in the corridor behind them. And following it, the laughter, no longer childlike but distorted, deep, and malevolent. They found themselves on a narrow, dark ladder leading down. That key, Lena whispered, out of breath. It's for a room that doesn't exist here. Maybe it's a secret floor. Alex looked at the key. Or it's the key to a room that doesn't exist yet. After a few more steps down, the ladder ended. They were in a small circular room made of the same cold grey concrete. There was only one object in the room, an old cast-iron safe built into the wall, and on it a combination lock. Next to the lock on the concrete, someone had scratched numbers in blood. 4 digits that looked as if they were gouged out with fingernails. 1502 February 15th, exactly 15 years ago, the day the last guests vanished. Alex approached the safe, his trembling fingers dialing the code. The safe emitted a long, heavy metallic click. He slowly opened the door. Inside, on a velvet lining, lay a single ring. A gold wedding band. It was covered in a thin layer of dried, almost black grime. Alex took it out. The ring was cold, unnaturally cold. As soon as the ring left the safe, the concrete door of the room slammed shut with a boom, cutting them off from the ladder. In the total darkness, the same nasal laughter echoed, now coming from inside the walls. They were trapped in a concrete chamber with only one way out, the ceiling, where there was neither door nor hatch, only thick, monolithic concrete, and the ring, which was clearly bait. The concrete room plunged into a dead, palpable darkness. Alex and Lena gasped for air. The only light source was the faint beam of the flashlight Alex held, which he aimed at the slammed door. "Stay calm." Alex struggled to maintain composure, his voice shaking. "There has to be another way out. It's not a coffin after all, but the room was a coffin, circular without a single window or hatch. The walls and ceiling were a solid gray monolith. The ring," Lena whispered, pointing at the object in Alex's hand. "Why, it's a trap, but for what?" Alex held the ring closer to the light. On the inside was an inscription. He struggled to read it. "Forever, ML, ML," he repeated thoughtfully. "Maybe it's one of the missing people. Marcus Langley. He was the last one to stay here." As soon as he spoke the name, a sharp, hissing whisper swept across the concrete walls. The sound was so low it felt like a vibration coming from their bones. "It's mine. He's gone." The floor beneath their feet began to heat up. The warmth quickly escalated into an unbearable heat, forcing them to jump. Steam rose from the concrete. "We have to throw it away," Lena screamed. "It's what lured him." Alex unclenched his fingers, and the ring fell onto the hot floor. As soon as it touched the concrete, the heat instantly vanished. An icy silence descended, but the silence was worse. From the ceiling directly above their heads, chunks of plaster and dust began to fall, followed by a grinding sound. Metal on concrete, the sound was like a huge, clumsy body being dragged across the ceiling. Alex's flashlight beam began to flicker, and then went out completely. Total, all-consuming darkness. Something glowed in the darkness. Not the flashlight, but a luminous, phosphorescent line that appeared on the ceiling, slowly burning out a contour that resembled a human figure. The figure was tall, thin, with long limbs, like the drawing in the corridor. "Alex." Lena choked out a whisper. The figure on the ceiling slowly, with a crunching sound, began to rotate, squeak, crunch, click. It wasn't just a figure. It was an opening. Above them, in the center of the ceiling, a hatch, or rather a section of the ceiling, was slowly and painfully being cut out from the inside along that contour. And from that slit, the first drop fell, a black, thick liquid that smelled of rotten water and salt. Lena aimed her own small backup flashlight upwards. What they saw was the climax of 15 years of terror. From the hole, now the size of a head, something was staring at them. This thing had no flesh in the conventional sense. It was a jumble of shiny black mold and skin, dry as parchment, stretched over an unnaturally long, thin skeleton. The creature had no nose or lips, but it did have a jaw, which now dropped open to emit a sound. "My guests, always return." The voice was a mix of a nasal, childlike whisper and a bass, metallic scrape. The creature, the hostel's host, as Alex's mind dubbed it, began to slowly descend. Its limbs, impossibly long and articulated, resembled spider legs, and its thin, sharp fingers dug into the concrete ceiling. "Room 19, Lena suddenly whispered, looking at the gold ring. "ML, Marcus Langley. Maybe he didn't escape. Maybe he was hidden." Alex, in a panic, squeezed the wedding band in his hand. He said, "It's mine. He wants the ring." Alex shouted into the darkness, "If you want it, you have to let us out." The creature stopped, hovering meters above them, its bony head glowing in the faint light. "You broke the rule. You took the bait." But there was a hint of hesitation in its voice. The ring was indeed more important to it than the hunt. Alex, sensing this tiny weakness, took a step forward. "I'll give it back to you. But first," Alex held up the ring. "Tell me, where is room 19? And what did you do to the guests?" The tension was immense. The creature made a sound like the squeak of 1,000 rusty hinges. Room 19. That it... me... Lena's flashlight beam fell on the safe. At that moment, on the wall above the safe, which had seemed empty before, an inscription slowly appeared with a sizzling sound. It was scratched not in blood, but something harder, and looked like a set of rules. Rules of the Wanderer's Refuge, Hostel 1. Do not ask questions about the noise. Do not look for what is lost. It will find you. Do not open room 13. If you hear a creak, run. 4. If you find the bait, the ring, you become part of the refuge. The guest who took the bait must become the host forever. ML Marcus Langley. He didn't escape, Lena realized. He became the new host. And that ring is the symbol of his power, or his cage. The creature, trembling, began to slowly climb back up. You don't want it, Alex whispered, looking at the creature. You want someone else to wear it. You want freedom. Alex sharply threw the ring onto the floor in front of the door. Take the ring, ML. It's yours, he yelled. We won't be your guests. The creature let out a piercing, despairing wail that was deafening. Its long, bony fingers slowly reached for the ring. Boom! Suddenly, the sealed concrete door leading back to the ladder flew open outwards with a crash, as if from a monstrous explosion. Without a moment's thought, Alex and Lena scrambled for the exit, ignoring the scraping and wails behind them. They raced up the ladder, without looking back at the thin, bony shadow that was rapidly crawling after them, but suddenly froze at the threshold of the concrete room, unable to leave its chamber. As they burst out of the hostel's back door into the damp night air, they heard the final sound from the depths of the building, not a scream of horror, but a long, mournful human sob that slowly turned into a quiet, relieved laugh. They didn't stop until they reached the car. Alex, breathing heavily, started the engine and sped away from the Wanderer's Refuge, whose glowing windows now seemed inviting and sinister at the same time. In the glow of the headlights on their dashboard, they saw that on the video footage Lena had taken in the basement, the word "leave" on the washing machine had vanished. In its place, a new inscription had appeared, scratched in a different handwriting. Welcome. Mel Marcus Langley had received his ring, his successor. Alex looked at Lena. The camera lay between them. The content was golden, but they knew this video would never be released. No rating was worth bringing another guest to the Wanderer's Refuge.